The stars looked different this far from home. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship, the Aurora's Edge, watching the endless black space through the main window. 3 years they had been traveling through the galaxy, looking for new worlds and life forms. Earth felt like a distant memory now. "Captain, we have something on the sensors," called out Lieutenant Commander Lisa Parker from her station. Her voice was calm, but Jake could hear the excitement underneath. Lisa was the ship's expert on alien life, and she had been waiting for this moment since they left Earth. Jake walked over to her console. The screen showed several large objects moving toward their position. They were still far away, but the computer was already trying to figure out what they were. "How many ships?" Jake asked. "At least 12, maybe more." "They're big, Captain. Much bigger than us." Lisa's fingers moved quickly over her controls, trying to get more information. "I've never seen anything like them before." Danny Chun, their communications officer, looked up from his station. His young face was worried. "Captain, they're sending some kind of signal. It's not like any language we know, but the computer is trying to translate it." Jake nodded. This was what they had come out here to find: other intelligent life in the universe. But something felt wrong. The ships on the screen looked dark and threatening. They moved in perfect formation, like hunters closing in on their prey. "Amy, take us to Red Alert," Jake ordered. Navigator Amy Rodriguez's hands flew over her controls, and warning lights began flashing throughout the ship. The crew had practiced this many times, but this was real. Chief Engineer Pete Sullivan's voice came through the speaker from the engine room. "Captain, all systems are ready. If we need to run, we can do it. Let's hope we won't need to," Jake replied, but he wasn't sure he believed it himself. The alien ships came closer. As they did, Jake could see them more clearly on the main screen. They were huge black vessels that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange spikes and towers covered their surfaces, making them look like floating cities of nightmares. Just looking at them made Jake feel uneasy. "Captain," Danny said, his voice shaking slightly, "I'm getting the translation now. They call themselves the Vexti. They're demanding that we surrender immediately, or they will destroy us." Lisa looked up from her station. "Captain, I'm reading some kind of energy coming from their ships. It's affecting our crew. People are reporting feelings of fear and panic." Jake could feel it too, a cold, creeping sensation that made his heart beat faster. It was like being watched by something dangerous in the dark. But he had felt fear before, many times. This was just another form of it. "Medical Officer Carol Brooks to bridge," came a voice over the speaker. "Captain, I have people coming to sick bay with anxiety. Attacks. Whatever these aliens are doing, it's affecting everyone." The largest of the alien ships moved ahead of the others. It was massive, easily 10 times the size of Aurora's Edge. Weapons that looked like giant claws extended from its sides, pointing directly at the human ship. "They want to talk," Danny reported. "Their leader wants to speak with you personally." "Captain." Jake straightened his uniform and walked to the center of the bridge. Around him, his crew worked at their stations, but he could see the fear in their eyes. The alien technology was designed to make them afraid, and it was working, but fear was something humans knew well. "Put them through," Jake said. The main screen flickered and changed. Instead of the stars and alien ships, a figure appeared. It was tall and insect-like, with 4 arms and compound eyes that seemed to look right through him. Its skin was dark and shiny, like armor made of metal. When it spoke, its voice was deep and filled with menace. "I am Zarathul, commander of the Vexti fleet," the alien said. "You will surrender your ship and your crew to us immediately. We have conquered 47 worlds. None have been able to resist our power." Jake looked at the creature on the screen. It was certainly frightening, but he had seen frightening things before. I'm Captain Jake Morrison of the Earthship Aurora's Edge. We come in peace, seeking knowledge and friendship with other species. Zarathal's head tilted to one side, like a predator studying its prey. Peace? Knowledge? These words mean nothing. You will surrender, or you will die. That is the only choice we offer. The alien's image flickered and disappeared. Jake turned to his crew. Despite the fear they felt, they were all still at their posts, ready to follow his orders. That was the thing about humans. They could be afraid and still do their job. The bridge of Aurora's Edge was quiet, except for the soft hum of computers and the distant sound of the ship's engines. Jake Morrison stood in front of the main screen, waiting. The Vex-TIE ships surrounded them like a pack of wolves, dark and threatening against the stars. Captain, Danny Chun said from his communication station, they want to talk again. The alien leader is requesting another meeting. Jake nodded. Put her through. The screen flickered to life, and Zarathal appeared again. This time, Jake could see more of her. She stood in what looked like a throne room made of black metal. Strange symbols glowed red on the walls behind her. Other aliens moved in the shadows, but Jake could not see them clearly. Human Captain, Zarathal said, her voice like grinding metal. I have been thinking about your species. You interest me in a way that others have not. Jake remained silent, waiting to hear what she had to say. In my long life, I have conquered many worlds, the alien continued. I have seen entire civilizations fall to their knees when they first see our ships. I have watched proud warriors become crying children when they hear our voices. Fear is our greatest weapon, and it has never failed us. Lisa Parker looked up from her science station. She had been studying the alien signals, trying to understand how their fear technology worked. Captain, she whispered, the energy they're putting out is getting stronger. It's designed to attack the fear centers of the brain. Jake felt it. Too. The cold, creeping sensation was getting worse, like ice water in his veins. Around him, his crew was fighting the same battle. Amy Rodriguez gripped her navigation controls so tightly her knuckles were white. Pete Sullivan's voice from engineering was tighter than usual when he gave his reports, but they were all still working, still doing their jobs. The people of Keter. Prime surrendered after seeing just one of our ships, Zarathal continued. The warriors of Vexen threw down their weapons and begged for mercy when they heard our battle cry. The scholars of New Avalon offered us their entire planet's knowledge. If we would spare their libraries. The alien leader moved closer to whatever device was transmitting her image. Her compound eyes seemed to look directly at Jake, studying him like a bug under glass. Yet here you stand, human. You and your crew show no signs of surrender. You do not shake with terror. You do not beg for your lives. This puzzles me greatly. Jake could hear the confusion in her voice. Whatever the Vex-TIE expected from their psychological warfare, they were not getting it from the humans. I have studied your ship while we have been talking, Zarathal said. It is small and lightly armed. You have perhaps 50 crew members. We have 12 ships and over 6,000 warriors. The logical response would be immediate surrender. Carol Brooks' voice came over the speaker from the medical bay. Captain, I still have crew members coming in with anxiety, but they're all requesting to return to duty. No one is asking to be sedated or to hide. That was interesting, Jake thought. The fear was affecting his people, but it was not breaking them. They were afraid, but they were not giving up. Tell me about your world, human captain, Zarathal demanded. What kind of planet creates beings like you? What dangers have you faced that make you so resistant to proper fear? Jake considered his answer carefully. Earth was far away, and he did not want to give the aliens information that might put his home world in danger. But something told him that honesty might be the best approach here. Earth is a dangerous place, he said simply. We've learned to deal with fear. Dangerous how? The alien's voice became more interested. What predators hunt you? What natural? Disasters threaten your cities? All kinds, Jake replied. Earthquakes, hurricanes, floods, droughts, ice ages, volcanic eruptions. And that's just the planet itself. He could see Zarathul processing this information. Her head tilted slightly, the way it had before. But the greatest dangers on Earth, Jake continued, come from humans themselves. This seemed to surprise the alien leader. Her forearms moved in what might have been confusion or curiosity. You fight your own kind? We've been fighting each other for thousands of years. Jake sighed. We've built weapons that could destroy our entire world. We've created diseases that kill millions. We've had wars that lasted decades and killed entire generations. The bridge crew listened to their captain speak. They all knew Earth's history. They had all grown up learning about humanity's long, bloody past, the wars, the genocide, the weapons of mass destruction. It was not something they were proud of, but it was part of who they were. And yet you survived, Zarathul observed. We did more than survive, Jake said. We learned, we grew, we decided to be better than we were. The alien leader was quiet for a long moment. Jake could see her thinking, trying to understand what she was hearing. This explains much, she finally said, but it does not explain everything. I have one more question for you, human captain. Jake waited. Zarathul leaned forward, her compound eyes fixed on him. When she spoke, her voice carried all the menace and power that had conquered dozens of worlds. Tell me, Captain, Jake Morrison of Earth, why don't you fear? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship, surrounded by his crew, facing an alien commander who had conquered dozens of worlds through fear alone. The bridge was so quiet that Jake could hear his own heartbeat. Why don't you fear? Jake looked around at his crew. Danny Chun sat at his communication station, his young face pale but determined. Amy Rodriguez gripped her navigation controls, ready to move the ship if needed. Lisa Parker watched her science readings, still trying to understand the alien technology that was supposed to make them helpless with terror. They were all afraid. Jake could see it in their eyes, feel it in the tension on the bridge. The Vex-Tie fear weapons were working exactly as designed. But his crew was still here, still doing their jobs, still ready to fight if necessary. That was the thing about humans, Jake realized. Fear did not make them weak. It made them careful. You want to know why we don't fear you? Jake said, looking directly at Zarathul on the main screen. It's simple, really. We're humans. We've been afraid of things far worse than you since we first crawled out of caves. The alien commander's head tilted slightly. Her compound eyes seemed to focus more intently on him. Jake took a step forward. You see, Zarathul, fear is not new to us. It's not some terrible weapon that breaks our minds. Fear is just another Tuesday for humans. He gestured toward Lisa at her science station. Lisa there grew up in Detroit. Not the nice parts of Detroit, the parts where you learn to run fast and watch your back. She's been afraid every day since she was 5 years old, but she still became one of the best scientists in the galaxy. Lisa looked up at him, surprised to be mentioned, but Jake could see the pride in her eyes. Danny survived Hurricane Katrina when he was 8, Jake continued, pointing to the communications officer. He watched his city flood, saw people die, spent 3 days on a roof waiting for rescue. He knows what real fear feels like. Danny straightened in his chair. The fear from the alien weapons was still there, but Jake's words seemed to give him strength. Amy's grandmother lived through the Holocaust, Jake said, looking at the navigator. She told Amy stories about hiding from monsters who wore human faces, about being afraid every second of every day for years. But she survived, and she taught Amy that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right, even when you're terrified. Amy nodded, her grip on the controls steadying. Pete's great-grandfather died in the trenches of World War I. Jake called out, knowing the chief engineer could hear him through the ship's communication system. He wrote letters home about being scared every minute, but he stayed and fought. Anyway, because his friends needed him. Pete's voice came through the speaker, stronger now. "That's right, Captain. Great-Grandpa Joe always said fear keeps you alive, but duty keeps you human." Jake turned back to the screen, where Zarathul watched with growing confusion. "We come from a world where our own kind have done things to each other that would make. Your conquests look like playground arguments," Jake said. "We've built weapons that can end all life on our planet, and we've done it multiple times. We've created diseases that kill millions. We've survived plagues that wiped out entire continents." The alien commander's confident posture began to change. She seemed smaller somehow, less certain. "We've looked into the void of space and decided to jump in headfirst, knowing full well it wants to kill us in 1,000 different ways," Jake continued. "Solar radiation, meteor impacts, system failures, alien diseases, hostile environments. Space tries to kill us every second of every day. But we're still here." Carol Brooks' voice came over the speaker from the medical bay. "Captain, the crew. Members who came in earlier are all asking to return to duty. They say they'd rather be afraid at their posts than safe in sick bay." Jake smiled slightly. That was humanity in a nutshell. "You see, Zarathul, you've made a fundamental error," he said. "You assume fear is weakness. For humans, fear is a tool. It tells us when to be careful. It makes us think before we act. It helps us survive." He took another step toward the screen. "We don't fear death because we've been staring it in the face since we learned to walk upright. Every human who ever lived has known they would die someday. We fear other things instead. What do you fear?" Zarathul asked, and for the first time, her voice sounded uncertain. "We fear failure," Jake said. "We fear letting our people down. We fear not being strong enough when it matters. We fear becoming the monsters we once were." He looked around, at his crew again. They were listening to every word, and he could see understanding in their faces. "Most of all," Jake said, his voice growing quieter but somehow more powerful, "we fear not learning from our mistakes. We've done terrible things in our history. We've hurt each other, destroyed our own cities, poisoned our own air and water. But we learned. We grew. We decided to be better." Zarathul was completely still now, her 4 arms motionless at her sides. "Your psychological warfare won't work on us because we've been our own worst enemy for thousands of years," Jake said. "We've survived ice ages, volcanic winters, asteroid impacts, and our own stupidity. We've fought wars that lasted decades over pieces of land no bigger than your ship." The bridge was completely quiet now, except for the soft sound of the ship's systems. Even the fear-inducing energy from the alien ships seemed less powerful somehow. "We've seen what real monsters look like," Jake said. "And they look like us." Jake Morrison's expression changed. The friendly ship captain was gone, replaced by something harder and colder. His crew noticed the change immediately. Lisa Parker looked up from her station, recognizing the look she had seen in history books. "About Earth's darkest moments. You want to know what we really fear, Zarathul?" Jake asked, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "We fear becoming like you." The alien commander took a step backward, something Jake had not seen her do before. "We fear the day we stop fighting for something better and start fighting just to make others afraid," Jake continued. We fear becoming lilies who mistake intimidation for strength. We fear forgetting the lessons written in our own blood. He moved closer to the screen, and his crew could see something in his eyes that made even them uncomfortable. It was the look of someone who had seen humanity's capacity for evil and understood it completely. "Let me tell you about fear, Zarathol," Jake said. "Real fear. The kind that shapes a species for thousands of years." Danny Chun felt a chill that had nothing to do with the alien fear weapons. He had never heard the captain speak like this before. "My great-grandfather fought in World War II," Jake said. "He told me stories about liberating camps where humans had been turned into numbers, where children were separated from their parents and never seen again, where people were killed not for what they did, but for who they were born as." Amy Rodriguez remembered her grandmother's stories. The old woman had rarely spoken about those times, but when she did, her eyes would get distant and sad. "We've had leaders who convinced entire nations that some people were less human than others," Jake continued. "We've had armies that marched across continents, leaving nothing but ash and bones behind them. We've had scientists who created weapons that could burn entire cities in seconds." Pete Sullivan's voice came from engineering, quieter than usual. "Captain, are you sure you want to go down this path?" "She asked," Jake replied, not taking his eyes off the alien commander. "She wants to know about human fear. This is where it comes from." Zarathil's compound eyes were fixed on Jake, but she seemed unable to speak. "We've had genocides that killed millions," Jake said. "We've had famines created by politics, not nature. We've had children trained to be soldiers before they could read. We've had entire civilizations wiped out by diseases we could have cured, but chose not to." The bridge crew was completely silent now. They all knew Earth's history, but hearing it laid out like this was different. It was not just facts from books. It was the weight of what their species had done to itself. "But here's the thing that makes it really terrifying," Jake said, his voice getting even colder. "We didn't do these things because we were monsters. We did them because we thought we were the good guys." Lisa Parker felt her blood run cold. She had studied alien psychology for years, but she had never thought about human psychology in quite this way. "Every war criminal thought they were saving their people," Jake continued. "Every dictator believed they were making the world better. Every genocide was committed by people who were convinced they were doing the right thing." He leaned forward, and for the first time, Zarathol took another step back. "That's what we fear, Zarathol. Not you. Not death. Not pain. We fear becoming convinced that cruelty is kindness. We fear believing that might makes right. We fear forgetting that the worst monsters in history were people who thought they were heroes." Carol Brooks' voice came over the speaker, worried. "Captain, I'm reading elevated stress levels from the entire crew. Maybe we should—" "No," Jake interrupted. "She needs to understand." He looked directly into Zarathil's compound eyes. "You conquer worlds through fear. You break civilizations with terror. You think this makes you strong. But we've seen where that path leads." The alien commander seemed to shrink before their eyes. Her proud warrior stance was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like shame. "We know what happens when fear becomes a tool of control," Jake said. "We've lived that nightmare. We've been the victims and the perpetrators. We've seen what happens when people decide that some lives matter less than others." He straightened up, his voice becoming stronger. "That's why we left Earth and came out here, not to conquer, not to build an empire, but to make sure that the worst parts of our history never happen again, to anyone, anywhere." The bridge was so quiet that Jake could hear the distant hum of the ship's life support systems. "You asked why we don't fear you," Jake said. "It's because we've seen real evil, and it looked like us. You're just another bully with bigger weapons. We've dealt with bullies before. Zarathul finally found her voice. What are you saying? Jake's expression became deadly serious. I'm saying your empire of fear ends here. Not because we're stronger than you. Not because we're smarter. But because we've seen what happens when fear is allowed to rule. The alien commander's 4 arms were trembling now. You would fight us? All of us? If we have to, Jake said simply. But not because we want to. Because we're afraid of what we'll become if we don't. Amy Rodriguez looked at her navigation controls, then at her captain. Sir, Earth Fleet Command is 3 days away. Should I send a message? Jake nodded slowly. Tell them we've found something that needs to be stopped. Tell them to bring everything. 4. The first time since the conversation began, Zarathul looked truly afraid. The silence stretched between the 2 ships like a bridge made of tension. Zarathul stood in her throne room, her 4 arms hanging at her sides, her compound eyes fixed on the human captain, who had just turned her world upside down. You speak of stopping us, she said finally, her voice much quieter than before. But you are one small ship. We are an empire that spans 47 worlds. Jake Morrison had not moved from his position in front of the main screen. His crew watched him, waiting to see what he would do next. They had heard their captain speak with a coldness they had never seen before, and it had changed something in the air around them. 47 worlds that surrendered without a fight, Jake replied. 47 civilizations that gave up because they were afraid. That's not an empire, Zarathul. That's a protection racket. The alien commander's head tilted in the way that meant she was thinking. You believe you can defeat us with words? I don't need to defeat you, Jake said. You're going to defeat yourselves. Lisa Parker looked up from her science station. Captain, I'm reading something strange from their ships. The fear-inducing energy is getting weaker. Danny Chun nodded from his communications post. I'm getting reports from all over the ship. People are saying they feel less afraid than they did before. Jake smiled, but it was not a happy smile. Fear is a tool, Zarathul. But like any tool, it only works if you know how to use it properly. What do you mean? The alien asked. You've been using fear to make people surrender, Jake explained. But you've never faced people who understand fear better than you do. You've never faced people who have been afraid of worse things than you. Pete Sullivan's voice came from engineering. Captain, their ships are moving. Not toward us. They're backing away. Jake could see the confusion in Zarathul's compound. Eyes. Her perfect weapon was failing, and she did not understand why. Your fear technology works by triggering the part of the brain that makes people want to run away, Jake said. But humans learned a long time ago to be afraid of the right things. We're not afraid of death. We're afraid of living without purpose. He gestured to his crew. Danny could run to the escape pods right now, but he's more afraid of abandoning his friends than he is of dying with them. Amy could set course for home, but she's more afraid of being a coward than she is of being a hero. Amy Rodriguez straightened in her chair. She had been scared, but the captain was right. The idea of running away while others needed her was worse than the fear the aliens were trying to make her feel. Carol could hide in the medical bay, Jake continued, but she's more afraid of failing her patients than she is of facing danger. Pete could shut down the engines and surrender, but he's more afraid of letting his ship down than he is of fighting impossible odds. The crew was listening to every word, and Jake could see the change in their faces. The alien fear weapons were still working, but they were being overcome by something stronger, the human fear of being less than they could be. You see, Zarathul, Jake said, you made a fundamental mistake. You assumed that all fear is the same. But human fear comes in 2 types, the fear that makes you run the fear that makes you stand and fight. Zarathal's voice was barely above a whisper. What are you? Jake's expression became serious again. We're the species that looked at our own capacity for evil and decided to be better. We're the people who turned our greatest weakness into our greatest strength. The alien commander seemed to shrink before their eyes. You said your empire would end. How? Because you've just learned something that's going to spread through your entire civilization, Jake replied. You've learned that there are people who can't be broken by fear, people who use fear as motivation instead of paralysis. Lisa Parker was monitoring the alien ships. Captain, they're sending messages to each other. Lots of them. They're telling each other what they've seen here, Jake said. And once word gets out that the Vex-Tai can be faced down, that their fear weapons can be overcome, your empire will start to crumble. Danny Chun looked at his communications panel. Captain, I'm getting a signal from Earth. Admiral Collins wants to know our status. Tell the Admiral we've made contact with a hostile alien empire, Jake said. Tell him they rule through fear and intimidation. Tell him we need the fleet out here, not to conquer, but to protect. Protect who? Zarathul asked. The 47 worlds you've terrorized, Jake replied. The civilizations you've kept under your thumb with threats and fear. When they learn that you can be stood up to, they're going to want their freedom back. The alien commander's compound eyes seemed to lose focus. You would make war on us? We would make war on tyranny, Jake corrected. There's a difference. We're not here to destroy your people, Zarathul. We're here to stop you from destroying others. Amy Rodriguez looked at her navigation panel. Captain, long-range sensors are picking up more ships. Human ships. The cavalry is coming. Jake nodded. When you return to your empire, tell them about Earth. Tell them about the species that learned to be afraid of the right things. Tell them about the humans who decided that some things are worth fighting for, even when you're terrified. Zarathul was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice carried none of the menace it had before. What will happen to you? That depends on you, Jake said. You can keep trying to rule through fear, and we'll keep stopping you. Or you can learn what we learned, that real strength comes from helping others, not hurting them. The transmission flickered and died. On the main screen, the Vex-Tai ships were moving away, their dark forms disappearing into the starfield. Captain, Lisa said, are we really going to fight an entire empire? Jake looked around at his crew, his friends, and saw the same determination in their eyes that he felt in his heart. If we have to, he said, but not because we want to, because we're afraid of what will happen if we don't. 3 days later, space around Aurora's edge looked very different. Admiral Collins had arrived with the Earth Defense Fleet, 23 ships of various sizes, from small destroyers to the massive carrier New Horizon. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship, looking out at the assembled fleet. It's quite a sight, Lisa Parker said, joining him at the main viewing window. I never thought I'd see this many Earth ships in one place so far from home. Jake nodded. The fleet was impressive, but he knew it was not really about the ships or the weapons. It was about what they represented, humanity's willingness to stand up to bullies, even when they were outnumbered and outgunned. Captain Morrison, came Admiral Collins' voice over the communication system. Please report to the New Horizon for briefing. An hour later, Jake sat in the Admiral's conference room with the other ship captains. Admiral Collins was a tall woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She had fought in the Mars Rebellion 20 years earlier, and Jake knew she understood the cost of war. Captain Morrison, she said, your report about these Vex-Tai is disturbing. An empire built on fear and intimidation is exactly the kind of thing we hoped we wouldn't find out here. Captain Robert Hayes of the destroyer Swift Justice leaned forward. With respect, Admiral, Are we sure we want to get involved in an alien war? We're a long way from home. Jake looked around the table at the other captains. He could see doubt in some of their faces. It was a reasonable question. Why should Earth get involved in alien politics? Captain Hayes, Jake said, have you read the reports from the worlds the Vextai have conquered? Some of them, Hayes replied. Then you know they don't just conquer, Jake continued. They break entire civilizations. They take proud, intelligent species and turn them into servants too scared to think for themselves. They've destroyed art, science, literature, philosophy, anything that might make people think independently. Admiral Collins nodded. Captain, Morrison is right. The Vextai aren't just conquerors. They're destroyers of culture and progress. Captain Maria Santos of the cruiser Liberty spoke up. But what can we really do? They have hundreds of ships spread across dozens of worlds. We have 23 ships. It's not about the numbers, Jake said. It's about showing people that the Vextai can be resisted. Once that happens, their whole system falls apart. Lisa Parker had been studying the intelligence reports for days. The captain is right, she said. The Vextai Empire is built on the idea that resistance is impossible. But we've already proven that wrong. Admiral Collins activated a holographic display showing the local region of space. Red dots marked Vextai-controlled worlds, while blue dots showed the location of the Earth fleet. We've been monitoring Vextai communications since Captain Morrison's encounter, she said. There's already unrest on several worlds. The news that their fear weapons failed against humans is spreading. Danny Chun, who had been invited as the communications expert, pointed to several red dots on the display. Admiral, we're getting messages from resistance groups on at least 6 worlds. They're asking for help. Jake felt a familiar tightness in his chest. These were the moments that defined a species, when you had to choose between safety and doing what was right. What's our plan? Captain Hayes asked. Admiral Collins looked around the table. We're going to do what humans do best. We're going to show up where we're not wanted and cause trouble for bullies. The room was quiet for a moment, then Captain Santos smiled. I like it. Over the next several hours, the fleet commanders worked out their strategy. They would not attack the Vextai directly. That would just make them martyrs. Instead, they would go to worlds where resistance movements were already forming and help them stand up to their oppressors. The key, Jake explained to the group, is to make it clear that the Vextai Emperor has no clothes. Once people see that their fear weapons can be overcome, the whole empire starts to fall apart. 2 days later, the Earth fleet arrived at Keter Prime, the first world the Vextai had conquered. It was a beautiful planet with blue oceans and green continents, but the Vextai orbital stations cast dark shadows over major cities. This is Admiral Collins of the Earth Defense Fleet, came the transmission to the Vextai stations. We're here to speak with representatives of the Keter people. The response was immediate and angry. This is Commander Thaxel of the Vextai occupation. Force, you will leave this system immediately or face destruction. Jake Morrison listened to the exchange from the bridge of Aurora's Edge. The Vextai commander sounded exactly like Zarathul had at first, completely confident that fear would make the humans back down. Commander Thaxel, Admiral Collins replied calmly, we're not here to fight you. We're here to talk to the people of Keter Prime. Surely you're not afraid of a conversation? There was a long pause. Jake could imagine the confusion on the alien ship. The Vextai were not used to being challenged so directly. The Keter are under our protection, Thaxel finally replied. They have no need to speak with outsiders. Then let them tell us that themselves. Collins said. What happened next surprised everyone. Signals began coming from the planet's surface. Not from the Vextai installations, but from hidden transmitters in the cities. The Keter people were trying to make contact. "Human ships," came a voice speaking heavily accented but understandable English. "This is Dr. Velter of the Keter. Resistance. We have been waiting for someone like you for 20 years. Commander Thaxal's voice cut across the transmission. "All unauthorized communications will cease immediately. Any further contact with the alien vessels will result in severe punishment." But more signals were coming from the planet, dozens of them. The Keter people were no longer afraid to speak. Jake watched his sensors as the Vextai ships moved to attack positions. "Admiral," he said over the fleet communication channel, "they're preparing to fire on us." "Let them," Collins replied, "but we don't fire first. We're here to help, not to conquer." The first Vextai attack came from their fear weapons. The same psychological assault that had been used on Aurora's Edge was now directed at the entire Earth fleet. Jake felt the familiar cold sensation, but it was weaker this time. His crew had learned to recognize it and deal with it. "All ships report," Admiral Collins called out. One by one, the Earthships checked in. The Vextai fear weapons were having some effect, but not enough to disable the fleet. The humans had been warned about what to expect, and they were ready for it. Captain Morrison was right, Captain Santos reported from the Liberty. "Once you know what it is, it's just another form of stress. Unpleasant, but manageable." From the planet's surface, more signals were coming in. The Keter people were watching the human ships resist the Vextai fear weapons, and they were getting braver by the minute. "Human fleet," came Dr. Velter. Voice again. "The Vextai are moving troops toward our cities. They plan to punish us for speaking with you." This was the moment Jake had been dreading. The Vextai were going to hurt innocent people to maintain their control. "Admiral," Jake said, "we can't let them massacre civilians." Collins was quiet for a moment. Jake knew she was weighing the options. If the Earth fleet attacked the Vextai directly, it would mean war. But if they did nothing, people would die. "All ships," Collins finally said, "prepare for defensive action. We're going to put ourselves between the Vextai and the civilian population. We don't fire unless fired upon." The Earth ships moved toward the planet, placing themselves in the path of the Vextai troop transports. It was a dangerous game. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but something unexpected happened. As the human ships moved to protect the planet, more signals came from other Vextai-controlled worlds. Resistance groups that had been silent for decades were suddenly speaking up. "This is the Free Vexan Movement," came one transmission. "We stand with the humans and the Keter people." "This is the New Avalon Liberation Front," came another. "We are no longer afraid." Jake smiled grimly. This was exactly what he had hoped would happen. The Vextai Empire was built on fear, and fear was contagious. But so was courage. The battle for Keter Prime never became the massive space fight that everyone expected. Instead, it became something much more dangerous for the Vextai Empire. A war of ideas, broadcast across the galaxy. Jake Morrison watched from the bridge of Aurora's Edge as human ships positioned themselves between Vextai forces and the civilian population below. The alien ships had stopped their advance, unsure how to handle an enemy that would not attack first, but would not retreat either. "Captain," Danny Chun reported, "we're getting communications from 17 different worlds now. Resistance groups everywhere are coming out of hiding." Admiral Collins' voice came over the fleet communication channel. "All ships maintain defensive positions. Do not fire unless fired upon. We're here to protect, not to conquer." On the main screen, Jake could see the Vextai command ship. It was massive, easily 3 times the size of any human vessel, covered in the same dark metal and threatening spikes as Zarathol's ship. But it was not moving to attack. "They're confused," Lisa Parker observed from her science station. "There," Whole strategy depends on people being too afraid to resist. They don't know what to do when someone stands up to them. From the planet's surface, Dr. Velter's voice came through clearly. Human ships, the Vextai ground forces, have stopped their advance. They're just standing there, waiting for orders. Jake was not surprised. The Vextai had probably never faced a situation like this before. Their fear weapons had failed. Their intimidation tactics were not working. And now they were caught between attacking civilians in front of witnesses or looking weak in front of their own empire. Commander Thaxel, Admiral Collins broadcast. On an open channel, you have a choice to make. You can attack unarmed civilians and show the galaxy what kind of empire the Vextai really are. Or you can show that you're capable of honor. There was no immediate response from the alien commander. Captain Morrison, came a new voice over the communication system. It was familiar, and Jake's blood ran cold when he recognized it. Zarathul, he said. Yes, human captain. I have come to see what you have done to my empire. On the main screen, Jake could see another Vextai ship approaching. It was the same dark vessel he had faced days earlier, but somehow it looked smaller now, less threatening. I have been receiving reports from across our territory, Zarathul continued. Worlds we have controlled for decades are in rebellion. Our fear weapons are no longer effective. Entire populations are refusing to obey our commands. Jake looked around at his crew. They were all listening intently, understanding that this conversation would determine the fate of dozens of worlds. You did this, Zarathul said, and her voice carried a mixture of anger and something else, maybe respect. You showed them that we could be resisted. We showed them what they already knew, Jake replied. That freedom is worth fighting for, even when you're afraid. My empire is falling apart, the alien commander said. Worlds that have been peaceful for generations are now in chaos. Ships that have never questioned orders are refusing to fire on civilians. What have you done to us? Jake thought carefully about his answer. We gave your people permission to be brave. There was a long silence. Jake could see both Vextai command ships on his screen, neither one moving to attack. Admiral Collins, came Commander Thaxel's voice, much quieter than before. I request permission to speak with the planetary government. This was not what anyone had expected. Jake exchanged glances with his crew. Permission granted, Collins replied. Dr. Velter, are you willing to speak with Commander Thaxel? We are, came the response from the planet's surface. What followed was the strangest negotiation Jake had ever witnessed. The Vextai commander, who had ruled Keter Prime through fear for 20 years, was now asking the people he had oppressed what they wanted. It turned out they wanted something very simple, to be left alone to govern themselves. This is not how conquests work, Zarathul said, her voice broadcast to all ships. We do not negotiate with conquered peoples. Maybe that's the problem, Jake replied. Maybe conquest isn't the answer. Amy Rodriguez looked up from her navigation station. Captain, I'm reading massive fleet movements throughout Vextai space. It looks like ships are abandoning their posts. Lisa Parker nodded from her science station. I'm detecting communication breakdowns across their entire network. Local commanders are making their own decisions instead of following orders from the capital. Jake realized what was happening. The Vextai Empire was not being destroyed by human weapons. It was collapsing under the weight of its own contradictions. When fear stopped working as a tool of control, they had nothing left to hold their empire together. Zarathul, Jake said, you can still save your people, but not by ruling them through fear. What do you suggest, human? The alien commander asked. Lead them by example instead of by intimidation, Jake replied. Show them that strength comes from protecting others, not hurting them. Give them something to believe in besides fear. Over the next several hours, something unprecedented happened. Vextai commanders across the galaxy began negotiating with the people they had conquered. Some refused and tried to maintain control through force, but they found themselves isolated and outnumbered by their own former subjects. Others, like Commander Thaxel, chose a different path. They began working with local governments to establish peaceful transitions of power. "This is remarkable," Admiral Collins said during a fleet conference call. "We came here prepared for war, and instead we're witnessing the first peaceful collapse of an interstellar empire." Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship, watching as Vextai and human vessels worked together to evacuate refugees from worlds where fighting had broken out. It was not perfect. There was still violence in some systems, and some Vextai commanders refused to give up their power. But for the first time in decades, people across the galaxy were free to choose their own destiny. "Captain," Lisa Parker said, "we're getting a transmission from Earth. They want to know when we're coming home." Jake looked out at the stars, where human and alien ships were working side by side to build something better than what had come before. "Tell them we'll be home when the job is done," he said, "and that might take a while." Because the thing about humans, Jake reflected, was that once they decided something was worth fighting for, they did not give up easily, even when they were afraid. Especially when they were afraid.